If you have your Bible, 1 Corinthians 2, we'll be starting in verse 1. And I, when I came to you, brothers, so Paul is talking to them about when he first came to them in Corinth, when he traveled there. And I, when I came to you, brothers, did not come proclaiming to you the testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom. For I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Underline verse 2. Or if you got it on your phone, highlight it, scratch in your glass, whatever it'll take for you to remember this. And I, when I came to you, decided to know nothing except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. And my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in the demonstration of spirit and of power, that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Yet among the mature we do impart wisdom, although it is not the wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age, who are doomed to pass away. But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age have understood this, for if they had, they would have not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear has heard, nor the heart of man has imagined, what God has prepared for those who love Him. These things God has revealed to us through the Spirit. For the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except the spirit of that person which is in him? So also no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but we have received the Spirit who is from God, that we might understand the things freely given to us by God. And we impart this, not in words taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual truths to those who are spiritual. The natural person does not accept the things of God, the things of the Spirit of God, for they are stupid or they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual person judges all things, but he himself is to be judged by no one. For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. Wow! That is a heavy-duty passage. If you checked out halfway through, you're like, this is too much Bible for me. Wow. I mean, that passage I just read to you is so heavy that I'm just going to try to do my best in the next 3 hours that we spend together to try to pull this apart. I mean, some of the Bible is like eating, French fries or like a nice Frosty from Wendy's. So you guys are like, it's Wendy's. Frosty's from Wendy's. Or just something soft and like it's easily palpable. This is like somebody throwing a 2-inch slab of steak on your plate going, go for it. And you just got to kind of chop your way through this steak. It's awesome. It's glorious, but it takes some work. And so that's what we're going to try to do, tear this apart a little bit this morning. So the number one aha moment for the Corinthians, today is Christianity another religious idea? Is Christianity another religious idea? They had religion. The Corinthians had religion. If you're here this morning, you're like, oh, Christianity is just another religion, or I don't need, when I talk to people, hey, why don't you come to the Orchard, man? Why don't you come check out what God's doing in our church? And they're like, man, I don't need religion. And you know what I tell people? I go, awesome, because neither do I. And they go, aren't you some kind of pastor guy or whatever? Aren't you like the religious of the religiousy people? Where's your clerical collar and all that stuff? People always ask me those things. They go, you got to be religious. You're a pastor. And I tell them, here's the thing. Are there parts of Christianity that I'm required to act out as my obedience to God? Yes. But my obedience to acting these things out does not equate Christianity. Doing the work of Christianity does not mean I'm a Christian. It's when my heart is transformed by the power of God, I become a new person. Now, because of my new nature, I act differently. If I, with my old self before I was saved, if I, with my old nature, tried to just act like a Christian, I might be looking like one, but I'm not truly one. That's called hypocrisy, right? Many of us used to live there, maybe live there today, and I'm hoping that you leave that today. That we try to act out something that's not true of our hearts. Because when your heart changes, your behavior changes. But you can try to make your behavior look like your heart has changed, but in reality, your heart's far from God. You're just going through the motions to make yourself or other people happy. And so I love what Paul says right here. Is Christianity another religion? Are we adding something on to Aphrodite? Oh, is Christianity basically religion without prostitutes? Is that what you're saying, Paul? No, it's not. Christianity is not just teaching about God, it's a relationship with God. And that is totally different. Watch how Paul breaks this apart. Is Christianity just another religious idea? Because Corinth was a rich, cultured city in the first century, and not far from Athens, which was home to many famous schools of philosophy, they were used to hearing great communicators on different topics. The city was devoted to various gods and goddesses, and the worship of them was integrated into the governmental and civic affairs of Corinth. So imagine this, you're running for mayor of Temecula, or Murrieta, or Hemet. Gary represent. Gary's running for mayor of Hemet, okay? Imagine if you had to run for the mayor, as part of your requirements for running for mayor, you had to sacrifice to Aphrodite. Or you had to offer some sacrifice to one of the gods or goddesses of Corinth. If they made you do that as a Christian, you would have a conflict of interest, right? Because you would like to be mayor, but you realize that in becoming mayor, you're going to have to sacrifice what really matters, which is your relationship with God, right? So there's this dichotomy of wanting to do civil service, but as my Christian duty, I'm going to have to sacrifice everything that I believe in to become a civil servant. That's exactly the way Corinth was. In our society, they don't make you do that. They don't make you choose to, you don't have to sacrifice, you don't have to burn incense to a god or goddess or sacrifice animals or whatever to some deity to become the mayor. But in Corinth, the religious ceremonial side was integrated into the civic and governmental affairs. So now watch how Paul is going to help them weed through this. When Paul came from Athens and started to preach in the synagogue to the Jews and in the marketplace to the Greeks, he made a point to not try and impress them with philosophical oration like the traveling speakers. In the midst of a multitude of religious ideas and secular philosophy, Paul chose to speak plainly about the death and resurrection of Jesus. The gospel does not need to be dressed cleverly, but rather declared clearly. Woo! If you're falling asleep, wake back up. Ready? This is amazing. Because you can't imagine how many sermons I've heard or evangelists I've heard that try to make the death of Jesus something cute and happy. And what they say to soften the blow of the fact that you're actually a rebellious idiot against God, that all of us are before we come to God. We're all self-absorbed. We're a spiritual black hole where everything that's on the outside, the closer it gets to us, just gets sucked into this selfish void that can never be filled. Just love me, do what I want. What's in it for me? Where's my peace? Everything just goes, just gets pulled into this soul of a black hole. And to try to soften the idea that you're really not that offensive to God, people always say, it's always what you're going to get out of Christianity. Hey, you want joy? Yeah, sure, I'd like some joy. You want some peace? Oh, yeah. Would you like some money? I'd love some money. Those three things is awesome. Can I get some joy and peace and money, please, Jesus? Well, then here, just say this prayer. You're like, oh gosh, all I got to do is say this prayer and I'm hooked up with those three things? Awesome! You know the funny thing is that there's no sinner's prayer in the Bible. You want to know why? I think it's so genius of God that there's nowhere you can turn here and go, just say this prayer in Colossians 3 and you're automatically saved. You want to know the miraculous reason God did not put a sinner's prayer in the Bible? Or in other words, some mumbo jumbo you say and then you know you're saved? Is because it's always a heart issue. It's your heart crying out to God. It is not religion that you speak with your mouth. It's a heart cry to God going, I am absolutely void of goodness in my own self. I need the goodness and righteousness of God to be given to me. How can I get that? I can only get it when I accept the punishment that Christ took for me on the cross that I rightly deserved. I can only get that through Christ. If I don't get it through Christ, I'm lost. So the reason God does not put a sinner's prayer in the Bible, it's not wrong to pray a sinner's prayer, but I want you to understand there's no specific words that are going to save you. It is the heart cry to God going, God, I am absolutely lost. I have prayed with people in restaurant parking lots to receive Christ. I prayed with people in churches at massive gatherings where people have come to the front and prayed to receive Christ. I prayed one-on-one at people's houses. People on their deathbed, literally in the next few minutes, are going to go see God. And here's the point I'm making to you. Paul doesn't come into Corinth going, please gather together and listen to my oration about, as I effervesce about the amazing things I know. He says he comes in there and all he does is preach Jesus like I just did. Unvarnished, uncovered. Do you get peace when you get right with God? Yes. Do you get joy when you get right with God? Yes. Does God promise to take care of you financially because now you're his child? Absolutely. There are great blessings to knowing God. But my point to you is that we don't soften the blow of what Jesus did by making some other dog and pony show to try to hide what Christ had to do for you. You show what Christ had to do, and then you go, oh, I see my wretchedness, I see the righteousness of Christ. I need that. You come to Christ, get saved, become new, you start acting new, and now God views you as his child. Now you get joy, now you get peace, now you get financial security because God views you as his child and not his enemy anymore. Isn't that beautiful? It's a different way of thinking about, it's a different way of thinking about God, right? Because here's my point, ready? If Paul would have came in and gone, you need some joy, then sign on the dotted line. You need some money, sign on the dotted line, Jesus will take care of you. You know what happens the first time you're broke? So, Jesus didn't really work out. You know the first time you get super depressed, or you go back to taking drugs, or you get drunk again and hit your wife, and your wife goes, God, I thought God changed your life. You kind of go, yeah, I thought he did too. I thought after Jesus came, I was going to have all this peace and joy, and now I hit my wife again. What happened with that? Here's the thing, is that you don't look at the fruits of the end as the thing itself. You don't look at the fruit as the tree. You say, we plant the tree, make the tree good, and the fruit will be good. Right? You don't get the fruit without the tree, but sometimes we want the fruit out here and go, oh, this fruit's amazing. The only reason the fruit's amazing is because the tree's amazing. And the only reason the tree's amazing is because God made the tree amazing. You can't get to the fruit without the tree. You don't get the tree without God. So the point Paul is making here, he goes, I didn't tell you about these great philosophical things that you could have with God, or I didn't try to make myself a great orator, so you go, wow, you're amazing, Paul. He goes, I started with Christ crucified. Just unvarnished, straight in your face, and then I brought the good things out that God can do for you. But you don't get this without this first, and that's Jesus on the cross. And I love that about Paul. You want to know why? Because the Corinthians, just like many of us, are used to hearing good speaking. You can hear some of the best preachers in the history of the church. Some of them are today, in our day and age, online, right? You're great speaking, some of the best in the history of the church. But here's the thing. Good oration without the power of God is useless. Now, good oration with the power of God is powerful. But don't get fooled into thinking, wow, that really sounded good, as equating the power of God. Because the power of God and words are two different things. But sometimes God uses words to impact people. And that's what Paul's saying here. The Corinthians were used to like, hey, where's the show? Where's the show? Let me hear what you got. Are you good, Paul? Paul's a rabbi. He's a Jewish trained rabbi that had Roman citizenship. He was a stud. He just got done preaching at Athens to some of the greatest philosophers of their day, the same place on Mars Hill where Socrates was tried. And we looked at that in Acts when we went through Acts. Paul knows how to speak, but when he comes to Corinth, he goes, you know what? I'm just going to stick with Jesus. I'm going to stick with Jesus and him crucified, boom. And here's the reason I say this to you. Is to some degree you need to stop trying to dress Jesus up in something that he's not when you speak to people. You go, hey, God loves you. God cares about you. But you got to get your heart straight with God first. I know you've gone to church. Awesome. I'm stoked for you. for you on that. But here's the thing, it's really not about going to church, it's about going to see God. And people's heart will go, oh, you know what, that is what I need. I don't just need more money. I need more of God. And I don't have any. And then you bring Jesus to the table, and you go, here's what Jesus did for you. Here's how your heart can be new. I love that how Paul does that. Doesn't go a whole big dog and pony show. Boom, here's Jesus. And here's him crucified, and here's why it had to happen that way. Because you need to be saved. That was an aha moment for the Corinthians. Because they were hoping to just hear some super speaker, and Paul just goes, boom, have some Jesus. I can speak. I can speak to you amazingly. But Jesus is way more amazing than myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to speak some orative theatrics. I'm just going to give you Jesus. Because it's the power of God, not my oration, that changes people's hearts. Oh, we got one that's still awake. All right, praise God. To show them the gospel was not just another religious belief based in man's wisdom, Paul demonstrated to them that the gospel had power. And I want you to look at this. Look at verse 4. In verse 4, it says a demonstration of spirit and of power. I want you to circle that word power. Because it's a Greek word dunamis. And it's the same word that we get the word dynamic from. If you say, someone's really dynamic, you have to go watch this guy or listen to this guy or this girl or whatever because they're dynamic. Or this science project has a dynamic aspect to it. What that means is it has motion, it has power, there's something about it that's dynamic. In other words, it's not equilibrium. It's dynamic. It comes out in power. It's the same word that Alfred Nobel of the Nobel Peace Prize, he came up with a word called dynamite. And it's based out of this word. Dynamite has power. It's a lot of power wrapped up in a small little thing. And when you give it a certain something, it lets you know how much power it has. And that's the same idea as the Greek word dunamis. And I want to give you an illustration of this. So the Corinthians, sorry about your drums, Matt. The Corinthians were very impressed with oration. Paul says, I'm not going to do a bunch of fancy oration for you. I'm going to talk to you about Jesus. This is the reason I'm going to talk to you about Jesus, is because man's wisdom, all the other religions, all the other philosophies of life, Buddhism would have been around in some form at this point. You got Zeno, the philosopher. You've got Socrates and Plato and all the other philosophers and their ideas about life. Man's wisdom has some power. So come on up. Come on up. You're my helper. Come on up. Come on up. Run on up real quick. Hurry up. No, not you. Sit down. Although I might need to use you. Come on up. So here's the idea. Come on up. Ready? Now, what's your name? Aiden. This is Aiden. And if you didn't know. Now, Aiden and I are going to arm wrestle. Okay? And so there's going to be a certain level of dunamis going on here. And so I want you to see this for the moment, all right? So he has a certain level of power. I have a certain level of power. Now, you promise you won't hurt me? You promise? Okay. So we're going to arm wrestle. Ready? So now here's the thing. In the idea of the Corinthians, there's a certain amount of power that man's wisdom has. Because when we think about philosophy or when we think about other religions, we to some degree we go, okay, that makes sense to me. Some of that makes sense to me. And some of the other parts of some other religions and cults and philosophies don't really make sense. We kind of go, well, it doesn't really line up with reality. But there's parts of it that does. So it has a certain amount of power. So in this illustration, there's a certain amount of power that human wisdom has. You ready? On 3, we're going to go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Ah! Okay. Try it again. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Ah! Oh, okay. One more time. You ready, Aiden? Why don't you give it all you got? You ready? Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Go! Oh, man, you beat me. Thank you, buddy. So now, watch. So there's certain levels of power, okay? So where's my, come on up. So, and so, what's your name? This is Desron, okay? My friend Desron. So you got Aiden and Desron here. They're going to illustrate these things. Okay? You wouldn't hurt a pastor, would you? Never. Okay, good. So here's the difference. So in one sense, there's dunamis in the sense that human wisdom has a little bit of power. It changes people's lives a little bit on the behavioral end. But Paul is saying the Spirit of God has the dunamis of God. It has the Spirit of God. It actually has access to the power of God. So it's on a different level than other levels of power. So we're going to arm wrestle, and your arms are as big as my leg. Are you ready? Are you joking? All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Ready? We're going to do it again. Ready? Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. I'm going to give you one more shot. Ready? Ready? Go! Okay, thank you. Okay, I use that to illustrate this. There's different levels of power, right? Okay. And it's the same thing with the power of God. The power of God is not just in human wisdom. It's not in a little bit of what people think. It's in the power of God to transform lives. And I think about Nick that did our offering this morning. A year and a half ago, he was in like almost spiritual no man's land. And God so grabbed a hold of his heart, he made him truly into a different man. That what you see today, even at the offering that he did this morning, is really when I'm looking at him, I was smiling because he's really a different guy than when I met him when they first moved here. And that can only be said of God. Can God do physical miracles in the world? Absolutely. God still does today. God moves in the world. Because if God doesn't literally move in the world, then it's kind of all just fate. It's kind of just like clink, clink, clink. Oh, God doesn't really interact in our world, and we just kind of finish history and we're done. But that's not the biblical God. God interacts inside of history. And we see the power of God changing people's hearts. It's one thing to change something physically. And I've been a part of physical miracles. It doesn't happen all the time. I can't do miracles myself. I can't just conjure up miracles. But I've seen God move miraculously, physically in people's lives. And on the other side, it's even more amazing when I see somebody's heart change. Because it doesn't do any good to fix your body and your soul go to hell. What's more amazing is the power of God to transform the rebellious, angry, bitter heart. And so all of a sudden they become soft and peaceful and helpful. And you go, how does that even happen? No psychiatrist can prescribe the helpful drug. You might be able to prescribe the happy drug. But man, if there was a drug for just being helpful, that'd be a great seller. Because what changes people's hearts is the power of God. And Paul says, hey, there's a dunamis small in man's wisdom about God, but there is dunamis wham in the actual power of God to transform lives. And that's what you've seen, Corinthians, that's what you've seen. I didn't come here going, look at my magical words I say. I came here with the power of God, and boom, people's lives changed. And that's a different way. And here's the reason. Christianity is not a religious idea. Let me wrap up this point. It's not a religious idea. It's not a religion among many. If you sit in your world religions class, it's not one religion among many. Because the one belief system of Christianity doesn't just reside in teaching, it resides in the power of God. And that's different. It's not a philosophy about God, it's the power from God. That's totally different. I would not be a pastor of a religious religion. The only reason I'm here today is because God changed my heart. The only reason I stand here is because God changed my heart. It wasn't an occupational choice I made. And you hurt my arm, Desron. Wow, man. Dude, what are you doing? I'm going to pray for you, buddy. Wow, that was... This presentation of power was probably both in physical miracles and in changed lives. Christianity without the power of the gospel is dead religion. If you ever go to a church and they don't talk about the gospel, the death and the resurrection of Christ to change people's lives, you are in a dying to dead church. Because a church without the power of God in the presentation of the gospel is a dying church. Because it's power in the gospel that changes people's lives and that creates healthy churches and transformative churches. Or else it's just a bunch of people getting together. You might as well go to the promenade, right? Bunch of people there. We don't call that a church. Well, I guess some people do. The reason a church is because it's the power of the gospel, right? Because what else is the point? I mean, I'd rather do something else with my Sunday mornings too, but I know if God shows up at a certain place, I'm going to get there, right? Christianity is not a philosophy about God, but a relationship with God backed by the power of God. The second aha moment, how can I understand spiritual things? How can I understand spiritual things? So maybe you're here this morning and you're a brand new Christian and you're thinking, gosh, you know what? I'd love to know God more. I'd love to think about deeper things than just the rudimentary things of God. I wish I knew deeper theology and belief in God. And Paul's going to talk about how that happens right here, because the Corinthians wanted to know themselves. Because the Corinthians loved knowledge and had a high view of wisdom and philosophy, Paul tells them that it was not wrong to desire the wisdom of God, that it was not wrong to desire wisdom, it just needed to be the wisdom of God. However, because the wisdom of God is a mystery to humans, it can only come by the revelation of the Spirit of God. So, the first act of the Holy Spirit on a person's heart becomes a spiritual metamorphosis. Underline that, circle that, highlight that. Because here's the key, okay? Here's the key. Like the little worm that is going to become a butterfly, the little caterpillar that's going to become a butterfly, it climbs up. I spent most of my young adult years in San Luis Obispo on the Central Coast, and right by there is Montana de Oro. And it's a beautiful state park. And once a year, the monarch butterflies just flock to this huge grove of eucalyptus that are by the cliffs by Pismo Beach. Sorry, not Pismo Beach, Morro Bay. And so they flock to this huge forest there, and as you're driving through, you see all these butterflies flying. Well, guess what? Before you get to those butterflies, you've got a caterpillar that looks a little nasty, is a little bit creepy. Before you get to the beauty, you got to go through some ugliness, right? I want to show you this spiritually. Watch. As you go from a caterpillar, there's something that not even science understands. There's something so fantastic that the caterpillar actually liquefies. It's designed, its DNA, it actually liquefies down to like gel, or it's a mystery. It's literally a miracle that it doesn't go from one thing and kind of morph into another thing. It actually goes from one thing into a totally different thing. And I think God builds those things into science just to irritate scientists. Because all of a sudden, you see this thing just liquefy itself inside of its own little cocoon, and all of a sudden this little liquid stuff just kind of starts reorganizing. And all of a sudden, slowly, this thing that had to crawl is able to fly. And you go, what just happened? A little worm thing turned into a flying thing. How does that even happen? It happens through metamorphosis. It happens when one thing becomes another. And that's exactly what happens spiritually. If that's never happened to you, I encourage you to think about your relationship with God. If you've never come to a place where you said, I am ruined without God, I need God in my life, and that God changes your nature, not that you won't fall back into some old patterns, but instead of staying in those old patterns now, you fight against those and want to get out of them. Whereas before you just stayed in them. You're like, okay, I'll just stay drunk all the time, or I'll just stay high, or I'll just keep on doing whatever. But now you fight against that. Now that's revolting to you. If that's never happened to you yet, that has to be the first step. It has to be a metamorphosis of your heart. You go from one creepy, weird thing in your heart to all of a sudden, wow, I'm beautiful in God's eyes through Christ. And Paul tells them, it's not about adding a religion to your life. It's about getting God into your heart. I remember when I led my wife to the Lord before, she was actually my boss. So that was a little odd working relationship. And so she was going through some hard times in her life, and I had just met her, and so we were dating, and we hadn't started dating yet, and we were just friends, and so I said to her, hey, your life's messed up, and you need, here's God. I was so gentle and loving back then.
I said, hey, you know what? This is a perfect example. It's like I just brought out the unvarnished truth. Just try to do it in a loving way. Just go, hey, you know what? You've tried everything, done everything. You know, you need Jesus to change your life. And I remember sitting down over chili cheese fries because we were both in college at that time, and we were just talking about all these things. And she was engaged to another guy at the time, and so this whole mess of a thing was going on. So I said, hey, you just need God to transform your heart and your life. And so she ends up accepting Christ, and God changed her heart, and through a whole bunch of different things, we ended up started dating a while later. And I remember going to visit her parents and a friend of theirs, heard, she had said, hey, you know, I became a Christian a few months ago, or earlier this year. And I remember the friend of the family saying to my wife, who wasn't my wife yet, saying, gosh, now you're going to be a better person. And it struck me that when he said that to her, I thought, that's not Christianity. Christianity is not becoming a better you, it's becoming a different you. Because he had grown up Catholic, and it's kind of like, as long as you do this, do your little, rigmarole, then God's happy with you, and the priest is happy, and the Pope's happy, and he drives around in his bulletproof car, and everybody's happy. And I wanted her to realize that it's not about religion. God doesn't expect you to do robotic things to make him happy and do a song and a dance. He wants your heart to be changed. It's not about becoming a better you. It's not becoming a happier life. It's about becoming a different you and living for God. Some of that will be happiness. God will give you happiness. But don't look at the happiness and go, I need to get with God to get happy. You need to get with God because God is God. And you are not. You need to align with God, and God will bless you. But don't think you're going to get blessings without aligning with God. And that's what Paul tells them. How can I know spiritual things? You need to be metamorphosized first. It's not about your behavior. It's about your heart changing first. After the transformation, the new Christian is able to discern God's thoughts and desires because he has the Spirit of God in him. Woo, stop. Do you hear what I just said? Some of you guys are thinking about donuts or lunch. Listen to what I just said. This is amazing. You know what the Christian belief is? You know what Jesus taught? Jesus taught that when you get saved, the Spirit of the ever-living, eternal, never dying, never created, never destroyed God comes and lives inside. Wow. That's not religion, right? That is actually the Spirit of God living inside. Totally different. Paul says, when you accepted Jesus, all of a sudden the Spirit of the living God comes and dwells inside. Things that you never understood before, all of a sudden you're able to understand. I remember when I heard preaching and teaching before I was saved, I just go, this stuff is like some weirdo mumbo jumbo stuff. I don't understand what you're saying. All of a sudden I get saved and I'm like, I couldn't get enough. I'm like, man, keep teaching me. Keep, pour it. I was like a vessel, like just keep pouring into me. I couldn't believe it. Before I was like a vessel with a cap on it and water just kind of flowed off and I was just still empty inside. But when the Spirit of God came in, it was like he pulled the cap off and my heart was just like enlarged to accept the things of God. And all of a sudden I understood things I never understood before. I wanted to hear preaching that I never even cared about before. I wanted to show up to church when I would have rather gone to the beach my whole life. It was amazing. And I can only equate that to the power of God. Nobody signed me up for a religion. I just found God, and he changed who I was. This new reality of having God inside allows believers to love God, love Scripture, and love one another in a spirit of unity. After a believer is born again, they begin a new journey of spiritual growth toward maturity. So there's metamorphosis, and then there's maturity. You get born, and then you grow up. Because the Spirit of God is able to impart divine wisdom to believers, as a person matures in Christ, they should be able to make informed spiritual decisions, not worrying about the judgments of unbelievers about their situation. So you're going to have some moms and dads, brothers and sisters who aren't saved, that are going to go, that's totally stupid. Why are you moving your whole family to go serve God somewhere? Why did you move to Temecula? And you know what? People that don't have the Spirit of God were just like you before you got saved. You couldn't understand why people did things for God. You give what to the church? Dude, the pastor's just going to go buy a Lamborghini, man. What are you doing? He's going to go buy his third house in Malibu. Keep your money, man. Go to Vegas. Have some fun. Pay the electric bill in Vegas. Leave some of your money there. It's like before we got saved, many of us couldn't understand spiritual things. And all of a sudden, God comes into our lives and we go, gosh, that makes so much sense now. So don't expect everybody, as you mature in Christ, as you grow up, don't expect everybody that's unsaved in your family that was just like you before you got saved to go, good job. They're not going to. They're going to go, you're dumb. You're totally dumb. But you know what? When you think differently about God, because God has made you new, you act differently for God. Other people won't understand because they were just like you and me. I don't understand. But when you have God, you understand. There are relationships that you need to let go of. There's girls you're dating that you need to dump. Straight up. Text them right now. Pastor says dump you. Hey, I'll go under the bus for you. Throw me right the heck under the bus. Watch this, ready? And I'm going to close up shop here in case you're like, oh, this is like in the third hour. Listen to what I'm saying. There are people in your life you need to get rid of because you're listening to voices that are not true. There are people that you need to get rid of in your life. And I'm not just saying never talk to them again. What I'm saying is there's inner circles close to you that influence you, that you allow people into the inner circles of your influence that don't have any right to be there. There are people you need to kick out of the influencers of your life. Bosses, moms, people that aren't saved, people that don't have the wisdom of God, they're going, chirping in your ear going, we need to do this, or you need to do that, or don't you let them treat you like that. Mom, get out of here. There are people inside your inner circles that don't have the Spirit of God. You need to kick them out of those circles. There are people that you're dating that do not have the Spirit of God. They may have gone to church, they can spell Jesus, but they don't know God. Oh, you can't believe how many things I hear from young people. I got some parents clapping. You can't believe how many things I hear from young single people going, I hear the dumbest things in the whole history of the United States and the world that ever existed. Like, hey, Johnny, you haven't been to church in a while. Oh, yeah, I haven't, blah, 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 blah. I got a job or whatever. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I should be good this week. Aren't you dating that girl, Gertrude or whatever? Oh, yeah, I'm dating her. I haven't seen her. How long have you been dating her? Oh, like 6 months or whatever. Okay, cool. Is she Christian? Well, the minute it goes like this, the minute I know that, I know it's over. For this reason. Because you can sense when someone has the Spirit of God. I can go to Haiti and know a person that's a total stranger to me. I can walk up to them and sense the Spirit of God there, and I'm in Temecula dating some other girl, and I can kind of go, well, she can spell Jesus and Christian, so that is good, right? No, it's not good. No, it's not good. Because the Spirit of God senses the Spirit of God. So don't give me this halfway, I got to rationalize things in my head. Hey, when the Spirit of God is there, you don't need to rationalize. In fact, when you have to rationalize something, it's a good indication that you're wrong. Right? If you have to go, well, what about this, and what about that, and what about this, and what about that, and, she comes from a good family, and la, 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 la. Who gives a flying rip? If she doesn't have the Spirit of God, she's out. If he doesn't have the Spirit of God, he's out. And that's what Paul is saying here. He said, when you start to mature in Christ, you got to start making smarter decisions. You got to quit being a baby and go, oh, the things that I didn't really know when I was first a Christian. Hey, you've been a Christian for 15 years and you're still acting like you're 15 seconds old. You got to start making some harder decisions. You got to start being the man of God you're called to be. You got to start being the woman of God you're called to be, and stop being a wimp. Jesus calls us to more than that. Jesus calls us to more than that. Because here's my point. You don't just get saved to go to heaven. You get saved to go to work. And going to work is hard, but it's glorious. So you need to stop going, what's in it for me, and say, what's in it for God? So when you're mature, when you start to grow up in the faith, you have to make smarter decisions. And some of you have been Christians for years, and you're still making the same stupid mistakes you did when you first got saved. And that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
Because it doesn't have to be that way. That's what Paul says. When you mature, you get the wisdom of God in your life. You have the Spirit of God, man. You know what's right. You don't have to have your pastor walking alongside going, no, no, no. Like you're training a puppy. Don't pee on the carpet. No, you have the Spirit of the stinking living God in you. So make right calls in your life. Make right choices. It's not impossible. Wow. Okay. I close with this. Once a believer knows that about the person of Christ, they are able to have the mind of Christ and are called to fulfill the purpose of Christ, reaching and loving a lost world. God does not want to withhold any good from his children or prohibit their understanding, but the mature will seek opportunities to serve him and learn. Isn't that beautiful? That's a you know what, I hope this has been an aha moment for some of you guys. Because it was for the Corinthians. Because all of a sudden they go, wow, it's not about philosophy or some great speaker. It's about the power of God, and I need to make better choices as I grow up in God. That's getting saved and then being discipled. Paul's discipling them. He's saying, when I was there, I just told you about Jesus, and a lot of you got saved. But now, as the years that have gone by, you've stayed the same. You're not maturing, even though you have the Spirit of God, and that's unacceptable. You should be making better choices over here than you were back here. I can understand you not making good choices when you first got saved, but man, it's been years. It's been years. So become this person. Don't live back here.